Good afternoon, everyone. We are happy to host our webinar for Luxoft in Italy as part of our series of free online events with famous IT speakers. Today, our talk is focused over the myth that writing code is a hermit game. You will learn more about the practical communication skills for developers, how to write clear code, reviews, handle thought conversations, and navigate tricky situations from our Luxoft expert. We have one guest speaker today, a young and talented experienced Scrum Master. Ricardo Pinto is a technology industry professional with 8+ years of experience. With a master's degree in artificial intelligence and robotics from Sapienza University in Rome and the postmaster specialization in industrial automation at the Polytechnico of Turin, his diverse skill set has enabled him to work in industries spanning the robotics, banking, and automotive sectors. Currently, Ricardo holds the position of Intelligent Vehicle Factory Domain Chapter Lead, contributing to autonomous driving. He's leading a team of software developers in the area of simulation, a critical aspect of developing advanced autonomous systems. After Ricardo he will answer your questions, which you can raise by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Let's see the agenda for today, because as revealed in advance, yes, there will be a game with prizes at the end of the session. Be sure you listen carefully because the game is related to what our speaker is sharing today. One of you have the chance to win a Bluetooth speaker. If you carefully then the answers will be easy to guess. Keep your smartphones handy. At the end of the session, you will need them to join the fun. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Ricardo. Ricardo, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much, Ileana, for the introduction and the kind words, and welcome everyone. So give me just a second and I will share my screen and we will start the presentation. So here we go. Share screen. This is the screen. And now you should see the presentation. I hope it is like that. Can someone confirm me?
Yes, we can see your slides. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So what are we going to do today? Today we're going to discuss communication for developers, as Ileana has already said and introduced. So just to go quite quick at the beginning. So this is the agenda. We will start from understanding what communication in software development actually means. My practical goal for today is not to give you some words and vague terms, but actually to give you, as developers, practical advices and exercises that you can do to improve at communicating, okay? This will be 3 areas, so speak better, listen better, and write better, but we will see later what I mean by that. Then, as anticipated, we will, of course, conclude the discussion, and there will be a Q&A session. So you will have the chance to ask whatever you want at the end. Let's start. Why do we even need communication for developers? One may, ask, because everyone knows that a developer is a hermit, like in a cave. So he's there, he's writing his code, he's thinking about, algorithms, solution, design. He's there to think about the code quality. He's beautifying his functions. He's maybe judging other solutions on Stack Overflow. I mean, does it sound to you that maybe our developers something like a real job? Have you ever experienced something like that? I mean, I haven't, honestly, in my experience, but I mean, it's evident that people would keep thinking like that, because typically when you see this difference between stereotypes and actually what you get on the job, the typical answer is, yeah, but it's just my company that doesn't let me code in peace. Come on, everyone knows that the developer is like a solo rock star genius that works alone in his little room and there, develop the most amazing feature I've ever seen. I mean, if you just Google for software developer, software engineer, whatever, these are the kind of pictures you get, okay? And to be honest, this is actually what you are always taught, at least in situations like, I don't know, college or universities. And this is also the practical experience we get. I attended the university in computer science, and most of my time, I mean, I was alone studying, writing code. Yes, there were occasional projects with other people, but that wasn't kind, you know, the norm. Typically, writing even code on paper. So one may wonder, okay, but that's the usual situation of a software engineer. Well, let's think if this is actually the truth, right? What is the most frequent activity that you do also in your daily job? And that's also something I would like to ask you, okay? So can maybe someone drop in the chat or even in the poll? Let's see if I am able to start here. The poll, let me check, because unfortunately I can't see the button at the moment. Wait a second, I will stop sharing for a minute. Let's see if we have it here, or if not. Okay, never mind, I don't see it, but everybody maybe can drop in the call for a second. What is, in the chat, I'm sorry, for a second, what is the most frequent activity that as developer you do? Okay, I assume we are in an audience, okay, of software development. Okay, thank you. Someone started the poll. I couldn't find the button. So you should see like a prompt, you know, with some options. I can list maybe some of them. You see like coding, for example, debugging or testing, code reviews. You know, there are some activities that everyone know. Let me now go back to the slides where I interrupted. While you select and you think a bit, let's go through the most frequent activity, right? Because we as software developers are required to do a lot of different tasks, okay? We're required to write code, to refine requirements, to test, to debug, to review code, to design, to help trainings, to write reports. Really, I can think of thousands of activities. Let's see from the poll what you are voting. Okay, I see that more or less there's a high percentage on coding. Like you're still voting, so I don't want to end the poll, but let me spoiler to you a bit. Coding for the time being is winning. I will let the poll open for another 20 seconds to let the others that haven't voted to vote. Let's see if it changes something. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's end the poll and see the result together. So it seems that coding is winning, then debugging, writing documentation, code reviews, some others. I don't see additional, let's say, activities. In the chat, I don't see comments. So let's assume this is the final result. Okay, fair enough. Let's check what the literature says, right? Because, I mean, when I was thinking about this, the first thought was, okay, maybe somebody studied this, right? I mean, software development is around from years now, right now. So let's see. And what I've seen in one study that is called The Time Famine Toward a Sociology of Work Time from the University of Michigan, they somewhat, aggregated the results of more developers and tried to, cluster their activities into 3 categories. So individual activities, interactive, and social, okay? Now, I won't go too much into the details now, but as you see, basically the majority of the activities are somewhat collaborative, right? So they are either interactive or social. But what does it mean? Okay, what are actually these collaborative activities that we do as software developers? Well, there was another study on that called Types of Collaborative Work in Software Engineers. And this was pretty interesting to me because if you see, only 4% of these activities, of these collaborative activities, are mandatory. What do we mean by that? For example, you can think of formal meeting on a regular basis, like, I don't know, dailies or planning sessions if you are developing under a Scrum framework. Collaborative activities are the next categories, which is the 14%. And they are activities like architectural discussions, when you contact one or other of your colleague and you discuss about some technicality. Then there's a 41% of ad hoc collaborative activities, something like pair programming sessions, for example, or even live code reviews. And the rest, 41%, are individual activities, like, for example, individual coding sessions, okay? So from both of these studies, we see that actually the 60% roughly of our time goes into collaborative activities. But if you think a little bit more on that, also a lot of other individual activities that we have actually require communication skills. For example, some of you voted code reviews, right? Well, it is written communication sometimes, so it is delayed communication. So you are writing a code review alone, individually, but somewhat you are still communicating with somebody. Same thing when you're writing reports, when you're writing emails or updating documentation or something like that. Yes, you are doing that individually, but in a sense, you are communicating to somebody else. So with such a broad description, we had to try to somewhat address the question, what actually is communication in software development, okay? And we will see this in this section. So what is communication? And most important, why you should improve at it. I mean, it is somewhat obvious and self-evident. If it makes 60% or more of your activities, of course, it would be better to improve it, right? So communication is not just conveying info, okay? It's about creating relationships and connections with other people. And, you know, software developers must communicate with people from other domains like at every time during their dailies, because they have to communicate with Scrum masters, project managers, designers, other engineers from other fields that are not computer science, program managers, but even, you know, domain experts. And compare this to, I don't know, real estate agents, right? Real estate agents are one of the professions that we think may have the, let's say, best communication skill, right? But they somewhat stay in their domain, right? They communicate with the, I don't know, landlords, other maybe agents, all the parties that are involved in the transaction of a house, for example, but somewhat they always discuss their domain, right? That's not really true for software engineers. For example, from my experience, in one of my previous companies, I was working with industries, right? So I had to actually interact with blue-collar jobs, for example, people that were actually operating a machine for which I was asked to write software. And I had to communicate to these people. They were important because they had to give me feedback on the kind of software I was in charge of writing. So it was really, really important for me to have a way to communicate with these people. Even if, let's say, job speaking, we didn't actually communicate in the same language because I was a software engineer, they were somewhat blue-collar jobs. Okay, but that sounds a bit like mambo jumbo, right? So I want to go much into the practical stuff. So when am I going to create those connections during my daily activities? What does it actually mean for me, okay? Well, you have plenty of cases where you are asked to communicate in this way. For example, in virtual meetings and project updates after COVID, this is far more common, right? I think everyone can relate. Then we have instance messaging and code reviews, of course, that is another very precise scope. Documentation, emails, right? Lots of practical examples where we are asked to communicate. We will go through all of this and even some more with examples and katas to improve. You may wonder what is a kata. If you are a software engineer, maybe you know it, but let's refresh our mind. So kata is a Japanese word that comes from the martial arts domain, okay? And that stands for forms, by the way. So in every martial art, you have this form. And it means that they are individual gestures that you can use for deliberate practicing any martial art, okay? And therefore, improve at it. It has been generalized as a concept during the years, and now it's also common in the software industry. But most commonly in the coding domain. For example, there are a lot of websites where you see coding problems like code kata that you can use to improve. To do a generalization of it, basically it's like when you are a musician, right? If you're a musician, of course you play music, it's fun, it's great. I mean, you're a musician, you're supposed to play music, but you also play scales, right? With scales, they are like fundamentals of your skill that you use every time and you practice every day, and then at the end, you will improve. So my goal is to give you some communication kata. So communication techniques and fundamentals that you can use to try to exercise and improve. You will find in the top right of a corner of our presentation this symbol that will tell you that the thing that I'm showing at the moment is a kata. There are some examples we will see through it. For example, presentations to colleagues, writing skills, meeting minutes. We will see it through it. Okay, we will go through the list of these improvements, and we will start with the 3 areas. So speak better, listen better, and write better. So let's start from what I think is the easiest one, actually. Speak better. Okay. Have you ever experienced the situation that you see in the title? So people keep asking me the same things. Do I speak another language? I mean, it's like a 100th time I'm repeating the same thing. Manager, another developer, whatever. If you are in this situation, the first thing you can think of is to reduce the occasions when you are forced to speak, to explain something speaking with the language, okay? Sometimes it's necessary and we will see how to do it, but sometimes it is not. For example, there are knowledge sharing tools that you can use and you can improve at their usage. For example, another study, implement an issue tracking system to seek coordination improvements, has shown that the usage of issue tracking systems centralize the information and reduce the need of coordination. So, quite practically, you have less occasions when you're required to speak. So you minimize the chances of error, right? So if you reduce the amount of information to be exchanged, you increase transparency, and you also collect a written history of what has been in the past. So, for example, just to be clear, I think everyone knows this commercial solution for an issue tracking system like Jira, for example. Keep an extra eye and attention on how you are using your system. You may find that there are lots of nice tricks that you can use to actually enhance details and reducing the chances you have to speak. Another classical situation is estimations, right? So, for example, they ask you for thousandth time, like in this comic, I need an estimate. Days, it doesn't matter. Somebody will come to you and say, please give me a number. Okay? How can you do that in that situation? Well, sometimes what we struggle to understand as software engineer is that these kind of updates are not, let's say, asked for no reason. They always typically have a reason. And the other stakeholders somewhat have maybe different objectives that you have. And so, first of all, what you should do is to empathize with your audience. So try to understand why this request is coming to you. What is the behind these questions? And of course, always assume that people have good intentions, because I mean, they are not there to annoying, they're making their job like you are doing yours. So what you could think is to try to keep out the unnecessary details. You are a technician, of course, you are a person of great details and great skills, because this is what software engineer are. But let's try to use simple and descriptive words for these updates and come up with a number, okay, with something that they want to know. How not to, let's say, come up with this number just, like in the comic before, right? So a random number, we will see how. There's a technique, for example, called probabilistic thinking that you can use, but that assume for a second that the goal is clear and that you have somewhat to communicate with these people. But please don't be afraid to say no. Be a professional. So if sometimes the request does not make sense for you, state really clear why this doesn't and try to get back to your, let's say, to the person that is asking your request with some more details. A technique to simplify is the Feynman learning technique. So instead of thinking that your peer is stupid, why you're asking me this question, I mean, it makes no sense. Try to challenge yourself to check if you know enough about the topic to explain it in simple words. Because sometimes people will just come back to you and say, yeah, but I don't understand, please simplify what you have to do. And somewhat software engineers typically are annoyed like that, right? Because yeah, it's clear, it's in pseudocode. But think that not everybody can actually understand or talk your same language. And one thing to actually translate in have in your mind is the Feynman learning technique. So it is a simple technique that says that you really understand something when you're able to explain it. So abstract information and concept keep the details out unless you're asked, and then improve at this. I will go a little bit more into the details later into this, but this is something you can start doing, okay? Start abstracting your information by using this technique. I also was talking about the probabilistic thinking, right? So one thing you can do is whenever you're doing an estimate, to be clear about possible issues that could arise, to use probabilistic thinking to assess the outcome. So whenever you have to communicate the status or possible, issues or whatever, inform your peers that this is not the only scenario. So the thing you are communicating is not the only scenario, but the most probable one. So for example, you could say, yes, I think that this will be, I don't know, 5 days or whatever, but please take into account that this other thing could happen. I think is not that probable, but we may have this issue, and that is out of my control, but will depend on this, this, and that. In this way, you are not only, let's say, communicating the information in a better way, but you are also offering the chance to your stakeholder to maybe improve the situation. Because if you say this, for example, to a Scrum Master, maybe they will have the chance to assess that scenario, to be clear that that scenario can happen, and then go to somebody else to try to fix that for you and to reduce the probability of that bad scenario. So transparency and completeness of information, that is really, really important. Katas, as I mentioned, to speak better. First is the Feynman technique, as I mentioned. So an exercise you can do is to write down a concept you want to discuss and that you feel you learned somewhat enough about it. So you feel that you are, let's say, quite confident. It can all be about, let's say, everything. Also, some news that you hear. It doesn't have necessarily to be related to software engineer. You try to explain it in your own words to somebody who knows nothing about the topic. So, I don't know, it can be your spouse, your colleague, or whatever. Of course, hopefully somebody that is interested into it. Don't start annoying people here and there just to practice. Get their feedback about it, see how they react, check the areas you found more difficult to explain, fix your explanation, and repeat. This will help you, to slim at every iteration your explanation, and you will become better and better to this. I also suggest you not only to, let's say, have an oral version of this exercise, but also a written one. It's really, really helpful also for the writing techniques that we will see later. Another obvious way is, since you are software engineers and most probably you're working in a team, is to organize tech weekly sessions. A tech weekly in your workplace is something really, really easy. I said weekly, but it can be also daily, whatever is appropriate to your workplace. Choose a technical topic in your favorite programming language. I don't know, I like C++, for example. You can take some C++ concept. Think about, I don't know, standard library, functions, design topic, whatever you feel is interesting. And prepare a short talk, technical talk, something like 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be like a long presentation. These will really help you at improving first at your presentation skills, but also to strengthen your communication effectiveness, because somewhat you have to communicate a technicality, some technical details, yes, to an audience of technical people, but of people that knows nothing or knows little about something. That would, trigger something in your mind to abstract and simplify concepts, things that will be really, really helpful for all the situations when you are required to speak. Okay? Cool. That was the easy part, because learning to speak better somewhat is easy with practice. Let's go to the hard part. Listen better. That is really, really hard sometimes. As Hemingway is saying, when people talk, listen completely, don't be thinking what you're going to say. Most people never listen. And that is the case, right? I mean, how many times you experienced that when you were in a meeting, you were already thinking what to say next? Come on, I think everybody of us at least one time experienced this. And that is the difficult part. I mean, we should start listening and not just hearing. How can we do that? Well, there's a nice principle called the RASA principle, that is receive, appreciate, summarize, ask. So receive stands for paying attention to the speaker, okay? Do not think in the background at something else, just pay attention at what they're saying. Maybe take some note down to understand, to note it down, to then take a look at it later. Also appreciate, so value what the others are saying, especially if you're not in a webinar, for example, like this, but you're in an interactive meeting, okay? In that case, just pause for a second. You can use the echo technique to repeat maybe the last point of a person to understand that you, to make sure that you have understood, but also to express your feeling and say, ah, cool, I understood. I like what you did there. Also, how many times you experienced the fact that you were talking in a meeting, you know, with all webcams off, all muted, you were delivering your speech and nobody answers. I mean, that's really frustrating, right? If you want to be a good listener, unmute yourself for a second and just say, oh yeah, that's a good point. I got it. That are really small gestures that can make the difference and can help, first of all, to, you know, catch your attention and to stay involved in a topic, but also to express some appreciation to your speaker and help him to conduct the meeting. The other point of the RASA principle is summarize. So have a feedback on what you've heard, summarize your concepts in other words. So for example, you think that, and that was your point, as I understand you wanted to, and summarize the point of your, let's say, colleague. That will help you to make sure you have understand and you have listened in the right way. And then probably the most important of all, ask questions afterwards. Every time you have the chance, ask questions to be sure that you have understood. That would highly and dramatically increase your chance to be a good listener. Another situation is, can you help me with this task, right? Maybe you are working on something and then you receive that annoying Teams sound that tells you, ta-da, there's somebody who's asking your attention. Can you do that? Can you please check this? And they give you a link, okay? The first instinct of software developers, typically, I mean, for those who, at least of those who have I interacted with, is yes, I open the link, I dive deeply into that, and I give you all my attention. I mean, that's great. But one thing that we are always missing is to ask, is that urgent? Is that something that I'm really needing? That you really need right now? Because, you know, lots of the time, you can just, you know, ask for when is the expected time of completion of this request? Do you need it right now? Because most of the time, I mean, at least to me, this had happened that the answer was, oh, no, I just wanted your feedback. Please take your time. So you need to learn to handle and protect your time and ask this question to actually understand the request of your audience, okay? And also remember that a broken promise is often worse than no promise. So before saying, yes, I will do that, be sure that you can actually do that, okay? Let's go to code reviews, one of the most probably difficult thing to do and when to be a good listener, okay? So when you are going to listen, so even if you are reading, right? Because in a code review, typically you are reading. I mean, maybe you are doing a code review live with your reviewer, and that's cool. But sometimes they are somewhat asynchronous, right? And you are reading stuff, but you are required to understand. So all the comments you will receive will be about basically these three things. So correctness, clarity, and style. So if you're thinking about code correctness, probably you did something wrong. Okay, so if the reviewer is correct, respond with something positive, something like, good catch, thank you for that. That would really help also the relationship you have in reviews. If the reviewer is not correct, provide examples to back up your point. So you do not just engage in comment war by saying, no, I think this is correct because, see the other parts of the code base, vague, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Be precise, post links. If you want to back up your position, you have really to be clear about it. So that you're also offering chances to your reviewer to understand, because they also may be wrong. Reviewers are people, okay? And they do mistakes. The other kind of comments are clarity comments. And I think that the important thing here is to understand that if somebody came up to you by saying that it is not clear, 99% of the time is not clear, okay? So you should treat your comment like you're treating a refactoring. So the fact that they get to you that this code is confusing, accept, not the exact solution from your reviewer, but accept the point of view of somebody that take a look at your code from an external point of view and hasn't understood what you were saying. So is there a way you can improve your code to be clearer? Is there a way you can refactor a couple of names or functions to get better? So try to treat these comments as a chances to refactor, okay? Again, if you don't agree, it's okay. You don't have to accept the comment, but take that into account to improve the way you look at your code. What in the end is probably the most annoying comment is the code style, right? I think everyone can relate by having accepted or having read comments when they ask you to change, I don't know, a small name or a style. Don't use this function with underscore, use this other function, these kind of things, right? Here you can be in two cases. So the first one, you are not adhering to a house style, let's say, coding guidelines, okay? If that is the case, plainly you're wrong. Thank you, reviewer, change that comment, and that's it. Don't start a code review war on the code comments in your PR. That is really the worst thing you can do, because that is not the place for those discussions. However, if you don't agree with some of this house style, please bring it up in the appropriate sessions. For example, if you're following a Scrum routine, you may have a retrospective. Go in your retro and say, hey guys, I noticed that we have this house style rule. I don't see the value of it. Can we think about changing? And then maybe you set up some discussions offline, but don't block the PR just for that, okay? If we are not talking about a house style comment, so it's just a personal preference of the reviewer, then I would say use the rule of toilet cleaning. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Are you going to maintain this? So are you going to clean the toilet afterwards? Then you win. You stand with your point because it will be your responsibility to maintain this. If it's the other way around, so if your reviewers are going to maintain it, they win. Because they will be in charge of handling this. So use common sense, but with these principles in mind, I think you can somewhat understand better the point of view of your reviewers. Let's check some katas you can use. One kata that you can use that is very simple to listen better, okay? It is the meeting minute exercise. So the next time you join a meeting, try to fill a report like this, okay? You don't need a fancy table. You can just sketch it up in your notes, on your notebook while you are in a meeting. That's completely fine. So list who is joining this meeting and list what is the motivation. So what is the motivation they have in this meeting? What are they doing here? What they want to obtain? Then in main point, you try to summarize what they are saying in the meeting. So what is their main point? What they want to convey? What is the information they want to give me? And then try to list the actions at the end of the meeting that each of these stakeholders is going to do. Okay, it may not be easy at the first time and even at the later stage, but if some of this is not clear, take the chance to ask questions. So for example, if you feel that the meeting is ending and nobody is really doing something after it, raise your hand and say, guys, I not understand. What are we going to do after? What is Anna, for example, going to do to be sure that she receives no updates in her, that she receives some updates about the project? Okay, these are fair questions, are completely fair questions. And the more you practice in filling things like that, the more it will feel natural for you to attend meetings with these goals in mind. Good. Let's come to, let's say, an easy medium improvements, which are the write better sections. Okay. Epictetus will say, if you wish to be a writer, write, which is somewhat makes sense, I would say. This on the left is one of my favorite comics in software engineers because I think it summarizes perfectly what is the main issue. There actually was a study also on that. You find the source here, but basically every software engineer that was asked to express why they had issues in a certain project, 100% of them says that the most probable potential categories of issue is communication, like 100%. So nobody voted no on that. And the second one was knowledge management and awareness. That, if you think about it, it's somewhat also related to communication, okay? So it is really, really important that somewhat we are all on the same page, okay? And how do we communicate in written form as developers? Typically with, again, issue tracking systems like Jira tasks, Jira epics, all these kind of things. And you have to make sure that you are on the same page with the other stakeholder. Let's see an example, just to be clear. Let's suppose that we have a to-do list epic, right? We want to implement an application that does to-do list, okay? We have this requirement in a Jira task. For example, we read that users must be able to add to-do list items with a single action. To-do list items must contain text and a binary completed states. Users must be able to edit the text of to-do list items. They have to toggle complete states. They must be able to delete to-do list items. So if I add something I want to do, I also want to remove it from my to-do list. And that I'm not required to save these things, but actually I have an auto-save system, okay? Seems pretty decent, let's say, requirement elicitation. But how do I know? I mean, let's try to think practically, right? You're a software engineer. Somewhat, this comes to your desk and you are required to implement this thing. Or maybe you're at a refinement, okay, in a Scrum session, and you have to somewhat challenge these requirements, right? To understand if they make sense to you. Now, there are books and books, tons of literature on requirements engineering. Of course, this is out of scope of this talk, but what I want to give you is some very small rule of thumbs that you can use to understand if these requirements that are coming to your desk may be improved and how to actually write it in a better form to improve them. There are 4 principles. So requirements of this kind should be complete, precise, non-conflicting, and verifiable. What do we mean by that? Let's see some examples. So for example, complete, just to relate to our previous example, right? Is the list we are talking about ordered, for example? Is the delete undoable? Do we have users account? Okay, so under completeness, you want to ask all these kind of questions, even in a written form, maybe. So when you're going to write this thing, if you are the one who's writing or if you are the one who's challenging this requirement, try to answer this question and try to write down some sentences that will answer proactively to these questions, okay? So try to challenge corner cases, for example, to challenge completeness. Precise, so is the to-do list item at the beginning of the list or at the end of it? I mean, it is not very precise, right? We don't have a clear direction of it. Maybe it's not that important, but in the end, if you are the developer, you want to know if you are doing the correct way, or at least if you are doing it in a way that is expected in the same way by the other stakeholders. Because you know what happens at the end? That people will come to you and say, no, but I meant this to be added at the end. Why you implemented to be added at the top? And now, maybe in lists is very simple and easy to change, but believe me, in complex projects, it can also be of a different case, right? So with precise, you want to challenge, the actual details of a request. Non-conflicting, it means that if you have different points of your requirements, you want to make sure that they do not conflict with each other, right? That I'm not stating A and then I'm stating B at the point right below. So for example, if you want to add the item at the end, do we have some way to scroll our window, right? This wasn't in the requirement. The requirement says that we just want to visualize what's in there. So maybe we are missing something, right? Or maybe we are saying on some way that we must have everything in one window, and on the other way that we have to add more stuff at the end. So somewhat this is conflicting. So try to challenge your requirement also at this stage. By verifiable, how can I test this stuff? How can I show that I implemented this? Is there a way I can show it? For example, how can I guarantee that the save state is the most recent one? Do I have timestamps saved at the end of every, to-do list bullet point item? This is very important because whenever you are required to implement something, you are also want to have a way to easily show that. So next time this comes to your desk, try to have these points in mind and to challenge your requirements on that. One thing that is really useful is to prepare a checklist. You can do that with your team, for example, if you are writing or reading a text on the requirements, make sure that they have at least all these requirements, all these checklists marked. Okay, that could be really, really useful at the beginning to understand if your item or your refinement, your task is complete. Another important thing is that you adhere to the single source of truth principle. What does it mean? It means that if you're writing something, you want to make sure that this thing you're writing is in one position and one only. You don't want to copy the same info on multiple locations over and over again. Because if somebody edits one of those, and not the other one, then you have conflicting things and you don't know what is the truth. I mean, how do I understand what is the most updated version? I mean, again, it's intuitive, but I've seen in practical cases lots of the time, wrong versions of this. For example, if you have an epic in Jira and then you have all your stories as a child of your epic, if you have a common information for all these stories, try to put them in the epic. Okay, they do not need to stay in the individual task, because again, if you then have to change the epic, it is very easy, simple, and the information is propagated in a nice way. Again, this is especially true also for documentation. Another practical case are email, right? I mean, tons of emails I think you write and receive at a day and on a daily basis, but emails, I mean, are often hated, but I think they are hated because they are used typically in the wrong way. Because they can be, I think, a valuable tool if the other option is the instant messaging system. So when you want to have a synchronous conversation, try to prefer emails. But when you write an email, try to focus on these things. So you must have a clear subject. A clear subject is the 50% of an email. So you should have something that is very, very clear, and I just take a look at it and understand what am I supposed to do. Discuss only one topic per email. We don't want to start, in various discussions. I just want to focus on one thing. You have to provide context to others, right? Maybe don't assume that the other people knows what you're talking about, especially if you're sending an email to multiple recipients, or especially if they are non-technical. And clearly state the best thing to do is through tags. So by tagging the other people, what you need from your recipients. Again, actions. I received this email. What am I supposed to do? Okay, are we on the same page? Am I communicating what I'm expecting from you in a good way? And double check before sending, of course, and do not start, guys, an email war, because otherwise it will be an endless discussions. Emails are for very quick conversation, very precise. If there is uncertain things and things to be clarified, emails are not the right place to do that. Let's see an example. So for example, on the left, we see an email by David that wants a feedback from Sarah on the login screen, okay? The subject is urgent, need help with login screen. What am I supposed to help with? First, when I see this email, this is the first thing that comes to my mind. Can you take a look at the login screen design? What do you mean by that? It is attached to the email, of course, but there are some things wrong, but I can't figure out what. Okay, what is exactly wrong? What do you want from me? What you are expecting? What kind of feedback? Okay, this is not very clear. On the right, you see a slightly better email, for example, that states clearly that you are working on the login feature of a new application and that you will want the input on that, specifically on the UI UX design, so not other parts of the login screen. You, of course, are conveying the info that you are attaching login screen, and also you are clearly stating what you need feedback of. So for example, the clarity of the login form, the placement of the forgot password link, the overall usage experience. I mean, now, of course, this is just an example, but you can relate of similar details for your topic. Also, by the way, you can now ask generative AI to help you to be clear, right? I'm not a huge fan of generative AI for lots of applications, but actually what they are good at is generating text according to guidelines. So that is exactly the problem we are tackling here. So let's use them for, let's say, at least what they were designed for, okay? Another common thing is the error messages, right? As software developers, we are typically most frequently communicating via error messages. So in a sense, it is also this an asynchronous communication, right? Maybe when you're writing an error message, you are communicating with another developer of the future, or even with yourself of the future sometimes. So you want to be clear in your error messages. So whenever you write, for example, logs, exceptions, or something like that, use clear names, give context, summarize the problem, and suggest a possible solution. For example, just by naming your exception, something like user configuration file reading exception, you are communicating to me that the problem I'm seeing through the error message is in the user configuration file. Okay, it's just a name, but at a glance, I understand what you're talking about. Or also, for example, let's see these error messages on the bottom. If I see invalid input, please try again. What does it mean? I have no clue about what I should do. Instead, if I read something about the email address, is not valid, please use a valid one, I immediately understand that maybe there's something wrong with the email address. Maybe, I don't know, the regex function that is supposed to validate my email is not that good, or something like that, okay? And then let's go to the other side of code reviews, right? Maybe you are the one who is making comments, so you're not reading them now, but you are writing them to address a code review. So what you should do? Well, you have two cases. In one, you are the reviewee, so you are the person that is about to submit a pull request to be reviewed. Okay, what you should do that? Well, first of all, prepare the reviewer by providing guidance in the PR description. In every system, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, whatever, you have a field called description, right? Populate that field, write the context, okay? What are you trying to do? What the reviewer should look at. So for example, all this logic is in these, I don't know, 4 functions. The most important of these 4 functions is the call routine number 1 function. Starts from there, okay? If you provide guidance in this way, you will ease your life of your reviewer in a really, really good way. And then try to summarize the feature you're merging. So I'm merging this because this is part of a broader picture, of a broader implementation, and you can read this here, okay? You don't need to add lots of details, okay? You can also reference other resources, but at least you're not just dropping your PR to the reviewer like that. And this will really help the communication. If you are the reviewer instead, assume the developers know what you're doing first. So do not start with the bias in your mind that says, okay, especially if you're a senior and you're reviewing junior pull requests, do not assume that they don't know anything about. Assume that they know what they're doing, and assume, most of all, good intentions, okay? The reviewee is not trying to take shortcuts. Maybe the feature that they developed, they did it like that because, I don't know, maybe there was a reason. Okay, ask. Do not assume shortcuts. Ask. So ask what was the reason behind this choice. Okay, and also try to pay attention to your language. So let's not use why you did this. Okay, this is probably the worst code review comment that you can deliver because it can be perceived as passive aggressive, right, by the reader. So if you want to suggest a solution, try with something. What do you think of that? What was the reason behind that? Can you elaborate? Can you give me some resources? Okay, things like that keeps the reviewee into the discussions and do not make them feel judged by the reviewer. And also write clear comments backed up with sources and examples. That is really important. If you are saying you are violating our coding guidelines, link or mention at least what rule am I violating. If I am the reviewee, I don't want to receive a comment like that and then start looking in my coding guidelines what I should do. That is really the worst thing you can do. Try to be precise, and the whole exchange, it will be really, really far more simple. And for both of you, there's the Reddit rule, the golden rule: don't be a dick. I mean, in the end, try to be as nice as possible, because in the end, you are reviewing code of another peer. Okay, so you want to really put some effort into things like that. The golden rule of all writings in general is write something that you would like to read. So whenever you are trying to write a documentation, a code review, an email, or any other thing that you are writing, please act as you were the person targeted by that message. This would really ensure that you will put some effort into writing that thing. Ending this section and moving towards the end of the presentation, let's see some writing kata. Okay, so exercises you can do to be better at writing. I am a huge fan of blogs. Okay, really huge fan. Now they are a little bit less popular into the web, but I'm really a huge fan. And if you're good at a language, a framework, or even something else that do not involve software development, consider writing it in a blog. Blogging is really a great way to improve your writing skills at work, and it could lead to really a lot of professional connections. It happened to me that I wrote an article that was somewhat, popular in some places, and I connected with some other developers that then I met at conferences. It's really, really a great way to boost your, let's say, circle, your inner circle of competence. How to start doing that? Well, follow the golden rule. So first of all, get your text down. Whenever you have your mind, try to put it on paper. Even if the form is bad, it doesn't matter at this stage. Try to translate the content from your mind to a piece of paper or to a virtual file. Then revise it. So go back and check, grammars, spelling, or all these things. And then in the end, edit the whole article to make it sound more, let's say, complete, more harmonious, more, let's say, uniform. Okay. If you don't feel confident enough for blogging, because I understand that it may be a little bit intimidating in the beginning, what you can do at this stage is to try with journaling. Okay, try to have your journal, write something about your day, note it down. It's really, really helpful to be better at writing. If you're curious, also I have one blog. I mean, it's not only entirely software related. To find software posts, you can see my LinkedIn post. At the end of the presentation, you will find the QR code to connect with me if you need. But in the end, it's an example of what I mean. If even journaling is intimidating, you can start even smaller by, tweeting, threading, or something like that. 180 characters of pure exercise. Try to summarize your concept, writing down, beautify, reach an audience, and post your message, okay? But please don't argue with strangers, because in the end, it's not worth your time. Treat it as an exercise to improve at translating your thoughts from, your mind to a media. To wrap up, see some conclusions. So, software development in structured organization is not a job for Hermit. I hope that if there's one takeaway of this presentation is this, that you should consider and look carefully at the chances you have to communicate it in your job. So being a software developer includes much more communicative activity than stereotypes show. And since you are forced to communicate somewhat, it's better to be good at it. And to be good at it, it means to learn to speak better, to listen better, and to write better. Of course, one thing, guys, communication doesn't mean that you have to show off, okay? You can be good at communicating without being extrovert, even without being good at presenting, okay? Take into account these 2-3 guidelines that we've seen today, and even if you're not, if you're an introvert, you're not the most, let's say, extrovert person of the world, still you will feel the benefits of improving in communication. And also, now that you know that how important communication is, do your katas and improve your workspace one commit at a time. Here you find some useful resources that I appreciated really when preparing this presentation and in general in my professional life. The first one is a book called The Senior Software Engineer, 11 Practices of an Effective Technical Leader. It is a book by Copeland, and it is great. I mean, it doesn't only talk about communication. It focuses on a lot of topics, but it's really, really helpful to understand what is expected from your job as a software engineer. And this is also when I started, after I read this book, when I started to realize that maybe communication, it was really, really important for my role. Then there's Soft Skills Software Development's Life Manual from Sonmez. This is somewhat, let's say, a little bit particular book, let's say, a weird book, because it's speaks of communication, writing skills, but also things like using your time, taking care of your diet as a software engineer. Really, it's weird. The first time I read it, I was like, okay, that's really strange, but it's really interesting. I encourage you to go for it. You also find it some draft of the book free on GitHub. By the way, there's also the introduction from Uncle Bob, so it's nice. I loved it. Then a couple of resources, written resources. Jonathan Boccara's Fluent CPP blog. It is a technical CPP blog. Unfortunately, it's a bit abandoned since a couple of years, but really it contains lots and lots of blogging, and it shows in a good way for me what a good technical blog should be. Last two are, the one is a book that is available online. It's called Cooperative Software Development by Co, that reflects on all the aspects of cooperation in software development. going from requirements to documentation to development, marketing, lots of good things. It is free to read, so you can find it online. And last, a video on YouTube from Uncle Bob called Expect Professionalism. I mean, there's also a book or an article on that, but you find it a short video on YouTube. It is from the, let's say, well-known software developer Uncle Bob, and it discusses all the, let's say, communication aspects related to the interaction between professionals, okay, between software developers, project managers, and other kind of professionals. That's it. I hope it was interesting. I am more than available for your questions. And this two QR code, you can use your smartphone and go here. You will find on the one in the middle my LinkedIn profile. I'm really happy to connect with you. And also on the right, my Substack blog profile, the one I was discussing in the slide before. It's mostly in Italian, but you also find some English content here and there. Thank you. I'm open to your question.
Thank you, Ricardo. So we are waiting our visitors to send their questions. Just to remind everyone that we have Q&A session on the bottom of your screens. If you feel more comfortable, use the chat function. So take your time. Seems that your speech is quite clear enough. There are not many volunteers. Actually, there is one question, but I think it's a more general one. It is about the work model in Luxoft. So what is the work model in Luxoft, in office, remote, or hybrid? So I will take this one and we'll share with our guests that our offices is located in Turin, but we are welcome people from other cities in Italy, and we offer also variety of possibilities for them to join our company and to apply for a particular job role. So let's give a few more minutes to if there are more questions. Until we're waiting, I would like to share a personal opinion, like being a non-technical expert, not a software developer. I would like to say that your topic and what you already shared with us, actually it's applicable for every profession, for every type of job, because these are very core and productive principles for all of us. So it was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
So we have one more question. It is, are there any onboarding trainings and other trainings available for people in your company? Here the answer is yes. We have a quite large and well-established internal training center in our company. Of course, the details are revealed after someone became part of our workforce. But with this question, because I don't think that we'll receive more of them, I will make a slight bridge to what I want to share with all of you. I believe that everyone today learned something new from you, Ricardo, today. And this will help everyone to grow somehow. I would like to take this moment to share with our audience another opportunity to enrich their knowledge and skills. This is our Luxoft Training Center. The services of this training center are accessible to everyone, including people who are not part of Luxoft in our country. So I will share a little bit more in the chat as well about it. And give me a second. Yes, in this link and on the QR code that is visible on the screen, everyone could enter and check all the available trainings. Our courses are led by industry experts, and upon completion, participants receive a certificate issued by the Luxoft Training Center. So feel free to explore all the IT&C trainings in the catalog and expand your horizons of potential skills. Sorry. Then I think that we could move to the fun part. As promised, here's a chance for all of you who stayed and hopefully carefully follow the presentation given by Ricardo today. So it is time to pause the video recording and to start our game. I would like, yeah, thank you. I would like to share with you some ways how you will get in touch with us in Luxoft. So remember that the latest Luxoft updates, news, and events are always posted on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages. So be sure you follow us to be in the know about everything going on at Luxoft. Thank you so much, Ricardo, once again for your time today, for the great presentation and very useful tips and tricks you shared with us. Hope everyone enjoyed that, and let's stay in touch.